POE, here's a quick tutorial on kind of laying out your ballistic device using sketch blocks. So what we're going to do is we're going to click New and Standard IPT. Even though your final device in CAD is going to be made up of many features and different parts, this is a good place to get started. So I'm going to start a new 2D sketch, start on the XY plane, and I'm going to start to bring in and create essentially sizes of things that I need. So I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I know my rectangle here, I'm just going to think of the side is going to be 12 by 0.75. So 12 inches by 0.75. And I didn't get that last dimension, so let me put this in here. Here we go. And that's going to be roughly the size of my base, and I'm just looking at like two-dimensionally. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and get out of the dimension tool. I'm going to highlight all this. I do not want to grab the origin, so we want to be careful not to grab the origin. And I'm going to go create. I'm going to create a block. I'm going to call this my base plate for my sketch block. So here's my sketch block, and over here on the left hand side it comes up that there is a base plate sketch block. So if you ever need to edit that, you can double click that, you can edit the sizes, and then you can come back. So back into my sketch, I'm going to go ahead and just put midpoint right here to kind of place it down, and it can rotate, which I don't want, so I'm going to put a horizontal constraint right here, and that little piece is fully constrained. Now I want to put in kind of a launch tube. Okay, it's my base plate. I'm going to have a launch tube, and now how big this launch tube is kind of depends on, you know, different factors. The PVC piece that maybe I found was 2.375 on the outside, and then inside it was a little over 2 inches. I'm going to make this right now 12 inches, and that can change. And then what I'm going to do is I want to bring in the inside of this. So I'm going to offset this dimension between here and here, and this is roughly 2 inches. I'm going to delete these two lines, and you'll get an idea what I'm doing here in a second. Select these two lines and turn them construction. And that's kind of the inside of my tube, and this is the outside of my tube. So I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to create block, and I'm going to call this launch tube. Okay, and I can kind of move this around. Now, I want to kind of position this somewhere where when I rotate it, it doesn't freak out. It gives me enough room here to kind of pull back a launch rod. So I'm going to say, I'm going to make my ball real quick. The ball is 40 millimeters. I'm going to type in mm. I'm going to create a block. I'm going to select this geometry, and I'm going to call this ping pong ball. And that should roughly, fit in there with some room. And you might find different size pieces of PVC that are a little bit different. So you can see here I'm just kind of creating blocks, and this is my ball. It's going to be launched out. So if I want my ball, say, sitting right here, I want kind of a plunger that I'm going to be able to pull back and launch out and kind of hit. So I'm going to grab another rectangular block, and this time, say I'll make it, 10 inches by 0.75 inches. And I'll just highlight this, create block, and I'll call this the launch rod. And my launch rod will probably sit somewhere in there as I pull it back and forth. So I'm actually going to double click this, and I'm going to put in a new line from here to here, make that construction, finish editing the block, and I'm going to do the same thing for this one too. So I have a line right in the middle. So I'm going to go from center to center, grab that, finish editing the block. And now I'm going to go collinear this line and this line. So now this tube, or this kind of launch tube, can move back and forth. I also want to kind of figure out like a pivot point for this. So I'll kind of move my ping pong ball all the way a bit. And, this I can just kind of put in a random spot, and then I can kind of play around with it later. So I'm going to say maybe a pivot point right here. Finish block. And then I'm going to grab another pivot point, and maybe put it somewhere right here. And again, I don't know where I'm going to put this yet, so I'm just going to kind of dimension this randomly and kind of see how things look. So now I have that. I will put this point on top of this point, and you can see here now I can move this up and down between different kind of degrees. So say I want to take a look at what 45 degrees will look at. Put it 45 degrees, and then this is kind of the bottom of my plane. If I pull this launch tube back, I can get it back about that far maybe. And will that be enough to compress and launch the ball out here? You know, that's something we're going to have to figure out. You know, you're going to have to put some kind of stopper here and a spring here. We might not like where that is, so maybe this needs to be higher. Maybe this needs to be something like 8 inches. And this will allow us to pull our block out much farther. So again, we're kind of using sketch blocks to figure this out. So now that I kind of, you know, I'm okay with this. This isn't bad. And my ping pong ball is right here. As this rotates, let's delete this dimension. As this rotates, where do I kind of want my other point to be where, you know, so this is a rotation point. Where's kind of my stopper point in this case? So again, I'm going to kind of just open this block, grab a point, and maybe I'll put the point right here. Finish adding the block. So now I got this right here. I'm going to grab a circle and go from here to that point. Turn this to construction right now, and you can see here that that point stays right there, and I kind of have an idea of where I want kind of my slot to be on my my upright or my risers. So I'll grab another rectangle, and I'm just going to put another rectangle here. This is going to be 12 by, we'll just say 12 right now. And this might actually have to be taller if we look at it. We're going to find that out in a second. But if we want this to rotate, we would say between here and here, we would say that 0 degrees or 180. That would kind of be the start of this. And then if I change this to say 80 degrees, now my point is way up here. So I would need some type of, you know, this would have to probably be extended. So if I extend this to say 14 inches, still not enough, maybe 16 inches, and now we're kind of looking all right there. It's not too bad. Let's go ahead and delete that. So again, kind of moves on that rotation there. So what I'll do is I'll grab a point, and I'm going to put it right here because that was the 0 point. And this can kind of rotate up. So I can take an arc, or you know what, I might take a slot. Okay, so what I did is I kind of highlighted all of my geometry I made so far for my side rails or my side shooters, and I'm just going to create that as a block to kind of clean up some of my geometry. So this would be like my side plate. And this should still move, which it does, which is fantastic. Ping pong ball launching out that way, different angles, and now I can kind of mess around with this. So if I have a circle, you know, right now I can draw out a circle. Let me go actually into this block and say this is a 3/4 inch rod that I'm going to use, and I'm going to have a bunch of holes at different angles all the way up here. So now I can circular pattern this, and the axis will be this, and I want this to go in about an 80-degree fashion, which it's going down, so maybe negative 80 degrees, and then I want to have stops at maybe every 10 degrees, so 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, so I want to go 9. So I can fit in 80. We do need to stop at 45 though, so this is 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, which we need one probably at 45. So for 45, I'll maybe need to go every 5 degrees, that kind of deal. So let's see here. You can mess around with the math, pretty much try to find a 45-degree point, and then you can go with the other 10, or you can go every 5 degrees, whatever it may be. But I can select OK, and ooh, this is out of value, so even though it works here, let's go 85 and maybe flip it. There we go. So 85, and I flipped it there. And now I'm kind of getting the idea of where my holes will be. Now this doesn't have to be a square either. I can come back if I want, and in this piece I could offset this circle out a bit to say something like this, and I could draw in some lines from here to here, and then I can actually trim this out, and I'll kind of have the shape of what I'm looking at right here. So we can get rid of this dimension and trim here and here, and now finish the edit the block. Now I've got something with a little more saving space, and it still rotate. It could rotate on another circle, and I kind of just trimmed it up and made it a little bit shorter. So you can kind of see how I went about that. Maybe you'll do a big slot, whatever it may be. You kind of want to mess around with some creating blocks and getting the geometry going, and making sure, again, if you're going to use some kind of plunger, or if you're going to use rods on the side that pull back, just make sure you have enough room. And this is kind of what you want to start with and look at, and then you can start actually taking the dimensions that you had in each of these sketch blocks and transform them into 3D modeled pieces.